People are so intrigued to learn about possibilities like natural burial or water cremation or human composting, and all of these ways that are speaking to a desire people have, but they don't know how to iterate.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up all the way from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as we attend the Festival of Homiletics. And we've got a special guest joining us for the intro this week. And then later on, I have the privilege of sitting down with Dr. Cody Sanders, who is a professor at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minneapolis. And we're going to talk about his lecture that he gave here at the festival, as well as his book that talks about how we as people of faith should be taking care of the dead. It is a fascinating conversation that you're not going to want to miss. So stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I am nervous.
Why are you so nervous?
Because we, for the first time ever, have a guest joining us on our opening intro.
You're absolutely right. Now, first of all, we are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the
Festival of Homiletics.
And oh, what a festival it is.
Our listeners are so jealous right now, but as we said last year, this is actually a wonderful event. It really is. But before we introduce our guest, I want to ask you,
yes,
if you know what month this is. I mean, wait, aside from Mother's Month, which we've celebrated faithfully for 26 years.
Yeah, well, I feel like this is a trick question, so I'm going to say May.
Close. This month is Asian American Pacific Islander Month.
Well, of course it is.
And in honor of that, and the fact that we happen to be in the same space, in the same city, with our favorite Asian American Pacific Islander, we have invited our dear friend Amy Butler to join us for the intro. Amy,
hey
welcome.
Hey.
Oh my gosh, I feel so honored that this is a first.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Wow, we've had you on Zoom before, but here we are, the three of us.
Live and in person.
I know, right?
This is so fun.
So fun.
So fun for us. The listeners may not tell a difference, but it's so fun for us. So, Amy.
Yes.
This is Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and just to give a little history, Congress in 1978 passed a resolution creating Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, but it expanded the observance to a month in May of 1992, timed to coincide with two important milestones in Asian Pacific American history. The first was the arrival of the first Japanese immigrants in the United States in May of 1843, and also the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad on May 10th of 1869. The majority of workers, of course, who laid those tracks were Chinese immigrants. So we are happy to have you here with us on this month and in this time. And Amy, I am confident that you listen to us each and every week. Am I right?
Obviously.
Okay.
Obviously.
So you will be 0% surprised that one of my favorite things to do in our opening...
No, you're not going to do this to Amy.
Yes, I am.
I am so sorry, Amy.
We're taking a quiz. Okay. So here's how this is going to work this time. I'm giving you and Mitch a quiz. We're having a little bit of a competition. The loser buys dessert tonight.
I was going to say,
okay.
do I get a prize? Okay.
The
All right.
loser buys dessert,
All right.
because I have a feeling I know who that's going to be. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions about your home state of Hawaii in particular, and we're going to give Mitch a chance to answer first, and then we're going to give you a chance. We're going to see what we're going to test your knowledge of your home state. How's that sound?
It sounds great. I really also appreciate that you're letting the man speak first.
I mean, sometimes, we
That
need to
to
do
me
that.
is what Jesus would want.
Absolutely. All right, so here we go. You ready,
Okay,
Mitch?
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to brush up on my Hawaiian history right now.
How many islands make up the state of Hawaii?
Oh my gosh, let's see. 1, 2, carry the 9. 4.
Amy, do you know?
8?
Oh, I was halfway there.
Well,
If this were The Price is Right, Amy would win, but no. 137.
No way.
I'm not kidding. Hawaii encompasses 137 islands in total, including 8 major islands. Amy, part right. We'll give you half credit. And several islets, rocks, and atolls. Span.
Okay, so what I was going to say was this is a multi-layered question. This is a hard question. It's not just like a straight question.
And you'll find most of these are. So, but it's okay, Amy, you're missing the point of this quiz. The point of this quiz
is to humiliate
make
me.
Mitch the loser so he has to buy us dessert.
Okay, but I'm kind of scared now. Okay,
You're good. How many official languages does Hawaii have?
Oh, my goodness. Well, the first, of course, was the King's English.
The King James Version, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go with 74.
Amy?
Could I ask for a clarifying answer?
Okay,
Like,
that's-
what do you mean by official
That is a-
languages?
Oh,
Great
official
question.
languages.
Official languages.
Oh, I was going with
That
an
is
official
the
count.
key. Official languages. And there's a fun fact after this. How many official languages does Hawaii have?
All right, I would say 2.
You are right. Okay, so in Hawaii is the only state in the U.S. with 2 official languages, which makes Hawaii the only official bilingual state. We can talk about all the problematic parts of that later.
But they are official, and they're all in all their documents.
Official.
That's
okay.
cool.
Yeah, but and when you're in the Hawaiian airport next time,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere, any Hawaiian airport, you'll hear everything in Hawaiian and English.
That's awesome.
So, how many letters are in the Hawaiian alphabet, Mitch?
Well, the last time I used it, it was. I'm trying to think of my Muskogee Creek, or no, the Cherokee language
Okay,
alphabet.
that's not the same as Hawaiian.
I know, but they think the same way.
Okay.
I'm going to go with 32.
Do you remember, Amy?
Missy, it's either 11 or 12, and I can't remember.
It's 13. That's okay. We have a bleep button.
Yeah, we've got a
Okay.
Missy button.
Cliff's great at that. Mitch, here's a softball.
Okay.
What water sport is Hawaii known for inventing?
Oh, it has to be surfboarding.
Yes. Surfing. The origins of surfing can be traced back to Polynesia, but its cultivation occurred off the shores of Hawaii.
That's
Now,
awesome.
Mitch, fun fact, please don't ever say the word surfboarding. People will know that you are not Native
I am
Hawaiian.
a professional surfboarder.
Don't say that either.
What food item can you just slap a mailing label on and mail from Hawaii?
Oh, I got to go with pineapple.
Are you kidding me?
No?
Oh, Amy?
Well, that's...
He's not right.
Hold on. I'm thinking. Whatever this is, I'm going to mail it to you when I get home tomorrow.
Of course you are.
I don't know the answer to this, Missy.
Macadamia nut?
Yeah, I mean, that would have been my
No,
thought.
that's what you bring me when you come here.
Yes,
No.
yes.
What food item can you just slap a label on and mail it?
I have no idea.
A box of chocolate-covered macadamia nuts.
I'll expect those next week. But no, a coconut.
Really?
A coconut.
So you can just slap
you
a
can
label
literally
on a
slap
coconut?
a label on a coconut. And
Oh, I've got to try this the next time. Or let me say, the first time I go to Hawaii.
Okay. So
I think it'll be Friday before I'm able to get to the post office. But first I have to go out and find a damn coconut.
well, this drops on Friday, so you're good.
Oh, I see what you did there. Drop.
Right.
Got it.
Right. Drops. Okay. Hawaii
that.
claims the biggest blank in the world.
The biggest blank in the world.
Cliff may cut this one out.
I'm going to go with, oh my goodness, the biggest coconut. I don't know.
Would it be volcano?
You're part right. Hawaii claims the biggest mountain in the world, the tallest mountain in the world. Yes, even when stacked up against Mount Everest.
Yep.
And Amy, help me pronounce this. Mauna Kea?
Mauna Kea.
Mauna Kea
Mauna Kea.
stands at a staggering 33,500 feet when measured from base to peak, compared to Mount Everest, 29,032 feet.
Really?
So we have a little envy there for Mount Everest going on. You can fill in the blank. So the height accounts for why Mauna Kea
Yeah,
is often snow-capped.
it is.
That's amazing.
Isn't
It
that
is.
fun?
You can go run around in the snow and go to the beach in the same day.
It's amazing.
That was remarkable.
Okay, so you guys did well.
Thank
Mitch,
you.
of course, you lose. You get to buy dessert when
I
we're
will
done
gladly buy
recording.
dessert.
So yeah, so
Coconut
Feel
pie
even
for everybody.
More nervous now. Oh.
all right, Amy. So now that we've talked about some fun facts, I want to know from you. You are our literal one of our favorite people, and also happen to be a Pacific Islander. So I want you to talk to us about the importance of this month, why we have it, and talk to us about your heritage and what you want us to know.
Okay, I have to back up a little bit to say that I grew up in the Hawaiian Islands. So my mother is white and my father is Hawaiian and Chinese. So figure out all the math and whatever. But I grew up during a time when they taught us that it was bad to be Hawaiian and super bad to be Chinese or any kind of Asian anything. Thank you, internment camps, etc.
Right. Yeah.
So what I was taught a long time ago in high school was the way that I would make a success and make the people in my island home proud of me would be to be as white as I could. And that meant go to college on the mainland, move away, do not speak Hawaiian at all, ever. The language almost went extinct in that time period. Don't ever, ever, ever speak Pidgin English, which is commonly spoken in Hawaii, and marry a white person.
Wow.
I did all of those things really, really well.
Right.
And so I was away from the islands for 30 years. And most people who know me think I'm a white woman. And, it's been recently, I've moved back a year and a half ago and have been thinking a lot about how trying to pass took so much of my energy and my life force. And I regret that so much. And so I think the importance of this month is there are people who have not been seen who need to be seen. And I'm hopeful that, this will be an opportunity for people to pay attention to who people say they are. I got one more story about this to tell you. Is that okay?
Oh,
Of course,
absolutely.
do
Go
tell.
ahead.
This was really came to light for me when I was pastor of Riverside Church, which was primarily an African-American church. And here on the mainland, the black-white divide is what often frames our conversations about race.
Yeah.
And I remember insisting from the beginning, but I'm not white, I'm not white, I'm not white. And at my installation, we brought in a Hawaiian holy man who walked down the middle of the cathedral and chanted an ole, which is what we do to call the Spirit of God. And I'll never forget the week I left Riverside, I got a text from a congregation member that said, I want to apologize. We never saw you for who you really are.
Wow.
Wow.
And that was so powerful to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Being seen is so powerful.
Yes.
And my heart breaks for you and what you're saying and what you're experiencing, and that so many cultures that should be absolutely celebrated are being told to squash that. I don't understand it. We, even as socially colored white European folks like myself, are missing out on so much in experiencing rich culture that we could be participating in, that we could be enjoying, that we could be learning about. So I think that's why this month these times of recognition are so very important. And I want to tell you, or I want to ask you, I have one last bonus quiz question for you. Do you know what this year's theme is for Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month?
I'm only buying one dessert.
You don't get a chance to answer.
I don't know, but I didn't read Wikipedia before this, so
All right. Well, I'm so thrilled that I get to tell you that the Federal Asian Pacific American Council announced the theme for the 2024 Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month as Advancing Leaders Through Innovation. And if there
Man,
were,
that's right down her alley.
do you love this segue? I'm just so proud of it because I read that and I just got chills because I thought if there's anything that describes our friend Amy Butler, it is an innovator and a leader through innovation. And we have had the privilege of hearing you preach this week at the Festival of Homiletics about innovation and about cultivating leaders in a new and different way in the church. And so I want to invite you to talk about how you are doing just that.
oh my goodness, I love it. I love it so much, and I'm going to talk about it. But I have to tell you a funny story because the not being seen part happens on the other side too. You know, I pastor a Chinese, mostly Chinese, a church in Hawaii. And I remember one day I was telling a story about a stripper who showed up at my Uncle Al Chalk's 80th birthday. It was a 9-course Chinese meal in Chinatown in Honolulu. And I was like 14 at the time.
If you make it to 80, Mitch, I'll do that for you. Okay,
Excellent. Can't
go
wait.
on.
It's a great story. I'll tell you later. But like 3 people were like, "Oh, I was there," and then after that, it was like, "She's in," you know, like it was the funniest
That
thing.
is
It was the
hysterical.
funniest thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of leadership and innovation because we're here at the Festival of Homiletics and we are mixing and mingling and preaching to and talking with pastors who are dealing with an institution that is not innovating, shall we say.
One could say that.
One could say that, yeah. And, you know, I can't even tell you how many pastors have come up to me crying this week. I mean, this work is hard. We're trying to reinvent something that isn't what it was before. And so one of my favorite parts about this week has been telling people about Invested Faith. And as you know, Invested Faith is a fund that receives the assets of churches at the end of their life cycles. We put those assets in a fund and we give small, unrestricted grants to faith-rooted social entrepreneurs who are building businesses, who are changing systems. And really what this has turned into is both a way for thriving churches to welcome a future we cannot yet see, and a way for dying churches to leave a legacy that is a powerhouse legacy. And so, you know, in honor of Asian American Pacific Islander Month, I'm glad to be able to tell you about Invested Faith.
I love that. You said a line yesterday in your sermon, and I want you to repeat it because I can't remember it exactly, but you were talking about we can't have, we need resurrection to have life. What was that line? Do you remember it?
In fact, resurrection comes after death.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about just the theological framework about Invested Faith is that it is a recognition of death. And so you do not bypass Good Friday. But in order to get to Resurrection Sunday, there has to be a death. And we're seeing that across the country. And there's no blame to be put. It's just the reality of what we're seeing. And I remember hearing you lecture about Invested Faith for the very first time, and you talked about the large amount of assets that the church at large holds around the world, to the extent you could put all the assets of Apple, Microsoft, and all the big companies together and combine them, and it would pale in comparison to the assets of the church.
Trillions of dollars.
Trillions of dollars. And you look at what's going on in the church today, and you see these incredible entrepreneurs that are doing Jesus kind of work. And let's get this out on the table. There is a misnomer out there that those who are doing this work are anti-church or anti-faith. We have met them, and you have told their stories. That's not the case, is it?
No, it isn't. In fact, I would say most of them will cry actual tears at the failure of the church to come alongside them in their work. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are doing the work that Jesus asked us to do. Mm-hmm. And they are as shocked as anybody that the church doesn't want anything to do with them. Mm-hmm. And I always just think to myself, like, how many passages in the New Testament recount Jesus going to a church council meeting at the temple? I mean, hello.
That's true. It's so true. But I like to think of, there was a generation that built these buildings, or many generations, and in other countries, thousands of years. But we need to become the builder generation of the next, like you said, the future we don't know yet, right, but we want to invest in, we want to be a part of. And so there's some scary things that you have to talk about in doing that. But I love the work that you're doing. I'm so thrilled that the theme for this year's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month is advancing leaders through innovation, because, Amy, that is exactly what you're doing. We're so thankful to be with you and to have you in our lives, and count you as such a good friend.
That plus the coconut thing, I know, are your favorites.
Absolutely.
I always love talking to both of you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, our first ever guest on our intro.
I know.
This was so fun.
It's exciting.
It's called innovation.
That's right. Well, Amy Butler is a hero of ours. We appreciate all that she's doing, not only in local church work and being a prophetic voice across the country, but this venture of Invested Faith is well worth your time to check it out. So make certain that you go to Invested Faith and check out all the work that Amy and her team are doing with these incredible fellows. It's just really remarkable. So, Amy, thanks for joining us.
Mitch and Missy, you're my favorites.
Aww.
Stay tuned. I'll be back with Cody Sanders, the Associate Professor of Congregational and Community Care Leadership at Luther Seminary. We're going to talk about his lecture that he gave here at the festival, as well as his most recent book, Corpse Care, Ethics for Tending the Dead. It is a fascinating conversation. Stay tuned.
Theological education should not be an echo chamber. That's why seminary students in the Baptist House of Studies at Perkins School of Theology experience an open-minded, warm, idealistic expression of what it means to be Baptist. The Baptist House of Studies supports each individual Baptist or Free Church student in the program. It doesn't matter if you join classes in Dallas or from elsewhere through the hybrid format. Learn more about the Baptist House of Studies at Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University. Go to smu.edu/Perkins. Click on Visit Campus to see upcoming webinars where you can learn more about all that the Baptist House and Perkins have to offer. That's smu.edu/Perkins.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us, joining us here at the Festival of Homiletics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Dr. Cody Sanders is Associate Professor of Congregational and Community Care Leadership at Luther Seminary. He's an ordained Baptist minister, and prior to joining the Luther faculty, Cody was pastor of a congregation in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and served in higher education chaplaincy at Harvard and MIT. He has a recent book that was published titled Corpse Care, Ethics for Tending the Dead. Well, Cody, thank you so much for joining us on Good Faith Weekly. Unfortunately, Missy could not be with us during this interview. Somebody had to work here at the Festival of Homiletics, and so she's manning the booth while I get to go have fun, listen to great lectures like yourself, and interview, having this stimulating conversation with you today. So we send our love to Missy as she's manning the booth today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, you just finished walking away from a lecture, which was outstanding, by the way. Congratulations. Very well received by the audience. Your lecture was titled Preaching Your Way Through an Apocalypse, Homiletics for Feral Hope Amid Collapse. That's a really daunting title.
A little ambitious, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about just kind of the idea behind the lecture, because, it started out just really recognizing from research that you're conducting about the state of not only the clergy, but also the state of the church at large. That it's been, I don't know if you know this, Cody, it's been a few tough years.
Yeah, it has been. And the research I've been doing with clergy has been sort of about the ways that they have been looking at the potential futures that we face in the world regarding climate, political turmoil, acceleration of technology, white Christian nationalism, a whole bunch of things that we face in the world right now, and what that's doing for them as leaders of congregations. And some of them are really addressing this with their congregation that also is very concerned about these things. Some of them have to sort of address this on their own because their congregations aren't really open to talking much about it. But some of the features of our life in the world right now, I think, are apocalyptic in a lot of ways. When we think about the sixth mass extinction, or we think about the ways that technology is outpacing our ethical ability to keep up with how we use it, or we think about white Christian nationalism and the fragmentation of democracy. There's so much that's being pushed to the edge of our life right now that I want to help resource clergy and congregations to address this well, to hold one another together in community, to be on mission with the Spirit, following Jesus into this apocalyptic world.
And because of the state that we live in these days and the world we live in, you had some great lines in your lecture. One, you talked about in your conversation with pastors, you mentioned the reality that pastors' souls are splitting because of the heaviness of the issues they're having to deal with, but not also in this apocalyptic time, but also this turning attention inward to the congregation. And here's the line that was just really jumped out at me. It's easier to fret over crumbling church buildings than a crumbling democracy. And it seems as though as we recognize all these things going on in the world that are in this very tenuous state, it seems like there are some churches who are shifting their gaze back to things that, matter, but,
Yeah. Well, that was one of the most interesting initial observations of the research interviews I've been doing with clergy is, no matter how pointedly I ask about futures outside of their congregation, local, national, global futures, the conversation almost always began with the clergy person talking about the problems and the things that they face inside their congregation.
Right.
And it took me by surprise because I thought the letter was so clearly worded about futures outside of our congregations. The ways that I ask questions were oriented to those external futures that our church is living in, but it's not about our congregation. But the clergy always had something about the budget, something about staffing, something about the building on their minds. Now, they always got to really beautiful and interesting things to talk about, about futures that are national and global and such. But it was really hard to sort of reorient them toward those futures and away from our specific congregation's future. And I think that is maybe suggestive of something about how our anxieties for everything that we are experiencing in the world right now need an outlet that we can sort of have some little degree of control over. And often that's what's happening to our congregation.
Do you think our clergy have permission, or feel like they have permission not only to think about these things, because obviously they are, because they're smart and thoughtful and concerned about the world at large, but do you think they have congregational permission to speak about these things out loud? Because, in our experience engaging with pastors and ministers across the country, many of them over the last 4 to 5 years have been a tad outspoken, and every time they are outspoken on a particular issue, they get a lot of kickback.
Yeah, I think it is risky for a lot of pastors to talk openly about the realities we face in the world. Some of the pastors said, climate change is off limits in my congregation. I can't talk about it. They're a rural congregation in a farming community. They see it. They know it's happening, but we can't talk about it in the congregation because it's too divisive. But then there are other congregations that are just so open about talking about the things they're passionate about. A congregation that's doing some really incredible work to help trans people move from one state to another to get the kind of care that they need that's been outlawed in their state. And it almost didn't matter if, this is a small sample size at this point. I'm still conducting these interviews, but so far it hasn't mattered what denomination they're in, whether they're rural or urban, what part of the country they're in. I interviewed an evangelical pastor who's outspoken about LGBTQ inclusivity. And I interviewed mainline pastors of affirming denominations that can't talk about LGBTQ. So it's all over. There's no clear way to determine who can talk about what where. It's just like a congregational question.
Right. Well, in this apocalyptic world that we're living in, we could spend all day talking about the problems, and especially how our brave ministers are navigating those treacherous waters. But you talk about a hope. Now, what I really liked about the conversation you had in your lecture about hope is that you began by defining a hope, but you also even preceded that by talking about the kind of hope you're not talking about. And in one part of the lecture, you talk about bad theologies of hope and how dangerous they are because they install false promises. So can you talk about that type of hope? And then we're going to get to the hope that you talked about, this feral type of hope.
Yeah. The last several years, I've just been listening really carefully for when clergy start to talk about hope and jotting down everything I can remember because, I have been just really frustrated with how thin our theologies of hope are in Christian communities and pulpits. And it almost is sort of a tag on the end of a thought process that lets people off the hook at the end. Well, all these terrible things are happening, but we have to have hope. They'll get better. Well, what does that mean?
Exactly.
If we're following a crucified Christ into a world of crucified people, just to say let's have hope is not the message of the gospel. So I want to move away from hope that is rooted in the feeling of optimism toward the future or ideologies of progress that things are bound to always get better, because they don't always get better and they don't progress in a linear, unfettered movement. And getting better for some sometimes means getting worse for others. And so when we talk about hope that's really just optimism and progress, we aren't talking about Christian hope. So I want to kind of rewild hope away from those domestications of its gritty nature, and to think about how hope can actually function for us, to move us into meaningful ministry in the world, to sit right alongside our grief, to really move into places of despair, because they're rooted, because that the kind of hope I am talking about is rooted in a relationship with transcendence, with God, rooted in relationships of togetherness with other people in community, and rooted in our relationship to the larger web of life. Those are the pieces that I think are really critical in rewilding our hope and making Christian hope mean something more than just hoping things are going to get better, but having no real reason to think that that's the case.
Right. And that's that rewilding. I love that phrase, rewilding hope. That is this feral type of hope that you're talking about. And you use some biblical examples in your lecture today that were just absolutely brilliant. One of those was, the women coming to the tomb that day. So speak about give us some biblical examples of what you're talking about when you speak of this rewilding hope or this feral hope.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one really good example, because I've almost felt like lately that when we think about the story of Holy Week and Easter, it's almost become a passion play in our imaginations.
Yeah.
Like, we imagine this as a story that it was supposed to teach us something about who God is in relation to us, rather than being a story about a state execution,
Right.
about an embodied death. And I think the women going to the tomb, when we realize, they're not going because they think Jesus has been resurrected.
Uh-huh.
They're stunned that he's not in the tomb.
Exactly.
They're going to anoint a corpse. And then they discover something there that they didn't expect, that animates them in new ways, that, at least in Mark's gospel, leaves them very fearful.
Mm-hmm.
But that surprise when one enters the place of death, being willing to look into the tomb to anoint a corpse with spices and tears, that is where the hope of resurrection was born.
Mm-hmm.
Not in an assurance that when they got there, things were going to be okay and he was not going to be there. He was going to be raised. They didn't think that.
Yeah. Well, in the lecture, you talk about the state of wonderness that leads to surprise.
Yeah.
I love that imagery that you encapsulated in it.
Yeah, I think wonder is one of the ingredients of hope that we've often neglected and somewhat lost in Christian theologies and ministries and practices, because wonder opens us up towards something that is outside of us, to others, to other human beings, to other more than human beings in the wider web of life, and it opens us to relationship with God. Wonder, I think, is really at the core of what the affect of hope feels like.
Right.
It feels like wonder.
Yeah.
And to really experience wonder, you have to be able to be surprised, to be led by curiosity into the unknown. Instead, the ways we usually talk about hope is just be assured that everything is going to work out, which just leads to our complacency. We don't want to enter the places of death and the tomb because we're sure, it's going to all work out in the end. But that's not how hope works.
Well, Cody, you're teaching at a Lutheran seminary right now, but to bring this portion of the interview to a close, the Baptist preacher came out in you because you had 3 points there at the end regarding this feral hope.
And I never preach with 3 points, but in a lecture, I'll allow it.
That's right. But you talked about transcendence, togetherness, and tethering. Yeah. So just real briefly, because this sounds like it's a forthcoming book, by the way. Tell us about those 3 points connected to this feral hope.
I think about those as possibilities in relationship, ways of being in relationship with something that transcends us, mm-hmm. Being a part of a story that is larger than us. Part of a narrative that has preceded our life and that will go on after our life, that includes more people than we can know, more creatures of the earth than we can know. So that transcendence dimension that connects us intimately to God. And then the togetherness dimension is the relationship we share with one another. I don't know that hope is really possible without relationality being a part of it. Mm-hmm. And in my conception of feral hope, at least, it leads to relationships of solidarity.
Right.
We're standing with one another, facing the brink, and knowing that we are going to be with one another, shoulder to shoulder, holding one another in solidarity, risking some of our comfort for the well-being of others. And then the tethering dimension is just that one piece that I think Christian theology has often gotten so wrong. In leading us away from the flesh, away from the body, away from the earth. And that, I think, has diminished our capacity for hope and diminished our capacity for relationship with the divine, because all throughout the text of Scripture, you see the wider web of life and even the cosmos being a locus of sacred wisdom, right. That the stars, that the birds and the fish, that the trees know something of God that we don't know, and know God in a different way than we know. And biologically, we are so bound up with the wider web of life that to pretend we can extricate us from that web has led, I think, precisely to all of the climate crises that we're facing right now in the world. We have acted as if we were not a part of the wider web of life. So if we're going to rewild our hope, I think it has to be a hope that speaks not just to our human lives, but to the lives of all beings bound up in this cosmic web of relationality.
Yeah, and that's beautifully said, because I think a lot of times we do forget or ignore or just downright turn a blind eye to the fact that we are created beings living within a created order. Therefore, we are connected. We live in this symbiotic existence with God, all of God's creation that extends well beyond this universe into multi-universes. Had this wonderful, went to this wonderful conference, BioLogos, this last spring, and they were talking about the multiverse, and it had nothing to do with Marvel Comics. It had to do with the expanse of the universes, and it was just really beautiful, and talking about God's design and all of that. So thanks for sharing that. Well, talking about created being, you wrote a book about a year ago that's been released. We've been trying to get you on the pod for quite some time to talk about this, but this, when you read the title of the book, it makes you pause, because it's a topic that's not often discussed, but people are very interested in having that conversation. And your book is Corpse Care: Ethics for Tending the Dead. So, why did you decide to write a book about tending the dead?
It had been on my mind for a long time. Even since I was a kid, I was really intrigued about what we did around death. I grew up in a small town where, we would go to the funeral home whenever someone in the church died. And so I grew up, being curious about what all this was about. In college, I worked at a funeral home for a little while to get a closer look at how we treat the dead and what we do. Then a few years ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Cambridge with Mikeal Parsons, who teaches New Testament at Baylor, but he was on sabbatical in Cambridge, and he was a part of my church during that time. And the very last day he was in town, and I started telling him about this idea, and he said, "Wow, that sounds really intriguing. I'd like to write that book with you."
Right.
And so we got a grant from the Louisville Institute. We traveled around for a couple of years to see some of the sites in the U.S. where major turning points in our care for the dead occurred, like the first rural garden cemetery in Cambridge, Mount Auburn. We traveled through the South and saw some of the major green burial, conservation burial grounds like Ramsey Creek in South Carolina and Honey Creek Woodlands in Georgia. And for, I think, both Mike and I, we really wanted to write this book because we both saw problems with how we had become detached from the care of the dead. And in that, there's a mirror that showed us how we are also becoming detached from bodies and detached from the wider web of life that body is returning to, in the distancing of the dead from the community of the living through the industrialization of funerary practices. We could see sort of a parallel distancing of human communities from the wider web of life. And so we kind of looked at this through both of those lenses and looked theologically at how we treat bodies, and how we were so surprised that a couple theologians that we really, admired otherwise said very, very outright that once the body is dead, there's no theological significance to it. And we thought that's ridiculous. So much of our liturgy and practice is about the dead body.
Right.
And everything we do in the Christian community is so embodied that the dead body has to mean something. And one of the things that we thought that it really means is that it shows us how intimately bound up we are with the wider web of life. The earth desires something from us in our death. It desires our bodies to return to the earth and to nourish other creatures. And for at least the last century or a little more, we have done everything possible to subvert that process from happening.
Right.
From embalming with carcinogenic chemicals to burial in caskets that are made of hardwood or metal, to then burying those caskets inside cement or metal vaults in this little piece of land that we own in perpetuity. The body can't return to the earth. The earth doesn't get what the earth wants from our bodies, and our bodies don't get to return to the earth that they belong to. So we tried to write this book in a way that would help people see that what we do with our bodies now was never inevitable, that our practices have a history, And there are other possibilities. And whenever I go to churches to talk about this work, people are so intrigued to learn about possibilities like natural burial or water cremation or human composting, and all of these ways that are speaking to a desire people have, but they don't know how to iterate for their body to be returned to the earth in some natural way.
Is this an instance, because, in the first part of the book, you talk about indigenous cultures and, how the colonists, began to learn about burying the dead here in, quote unquote, the New World. But do you think this is another example in our previous conversation about your lecture about Christian theology's misinterpreting resurrection theology because we just blow over, Good Friday. We talk about it as this salvific moment in history, but we don't talk about the importance of the physical death that then leads to new life or resurrection or renewal in the earthly symbolic or symbiotic sense of creation. Do you think that we've concentrated so much on Sunday that we have just totally lost the importance of Friday in every sense of the term?
Yeah, I mean, there at the center of the story is a body, and an executed body, and a body that is buried, and a body that is cared for by that body's own community. That's what the women are doing when they come back to the tomb, is caring for the bodies of the dead, which, Christian communities for most of history have done, but lately, the last 150 years, haven't really done so much. Because we've given that over to a professionalized chain of events that is pretty far removed from most families.
Right.
But yes, I do think that our continued turning away from the embodied nature of the crucifixion and resurrection story, because also we don't often imagine the resurrection as being all that embodied, and the Gospels go out of their way to show how embodied Jesus was in resurrection.
Yeah.
And, to think about the resurrection of our bodies is also an embodied theology. And I often, I've been thinking lately about the ways that when our bodies decompose in the ground, as, millions and millions of bodies have for that, 2,000 years of Christian history, if we think about those bodies being resurrected, we're talking about the resurrection of a huge expanse of the wider web of life, because our bodies are completely entangled within that web in their decomposition and return to the earth. So there's something even, even grander than the individual resurrection of my body. When we talk about the resurrection, we're talking about something that involves the whole earth, and that certainly gets missed in most of our theologies.
Yeah. And I think it's also, working through the book, and then I'm just really confess some things here to you. I've been really trying to deconstruct my colonized faith and get in touch with my indigenous culture and, the faith of my ancestors. And so, one of the things that has been intriguing to me has been this connection with those that have gone before me, the ancestors on whose shoulders I stand, who were real people, real beings, and this connectedness. And it's beyond a spiritual connectedness. It is a physical connectedness. And when I think about indigenous funerals, for example, and I've attended several of them in my lifetime, that there is this great care of the body, and to the point where the spirit lingers near the body. And so when we would go to the caskets of my deceased relatives, the elders would take a eagle feather and stir the soul that was near the body. And then they would place a meal inside the casket for the journey to the other side. Usually it was sofki and fry bread is what they would put on it, or put in the casket. And so there was a kind of a hybrid of Christian tradition, but also ancestral tradition of caring for the corpse here in the here and now, but also in the afterlife as they continued their journey beyond. So I think, reading through the book, I think we can learn a lot from other cultures and how they treat the dead.
Yeah, I definitely think we have neglected the wisdom of other cultures, other religious traditions, the care that a traditional Jewish process of care for the body goes through. I mean, if in combing the hair, if any of the deceased person's hair comes off in the comb, it's returned to the body, you know, and songs and prayers are sung over the body as it's being washed and prepared. I mean, just really intimate, beautiful ways of treating this body as the person that we know, and not having this sort of shell mentality that, well, they're gone, the body doesn't matter anymore, because I think that does eventually get down the road to being, well, fleshly things of the earth don't matter anymore, because there's something spiritual that's more important than this, and that's where our theologies have often led us astray. The other cultures, Muslim cultures also bury the body naturally in the ground in shrouds. And, thinking about this connection to ancestor, that's something that in the last, a few years has become really important to me to recover, both biological ancestors and spiritual ancestors, like all of the LGBTQ people that came before me in the Christian faith, whose stories are just not told, not known. We act as if they didn't exist, and they're incredible stories of beauty and faith, and stories I want to be connected to, because I want to be connected to those ancestors that I belong to, and I want to help the church recover their stories because they belong to the church. Right. And I've been influenced in this by a Muskogee geographer named Laura Harjo.
Oh, I know the Harjo family.
Yeah. Well, she is a geographer who wrote a beautiful book called Spiral to the Stars. And she talks about the time-space kin envelope. And that image has really helped me to figure out new ways into thinking about my relationship to people through time, and not just in the here and now, across space, and to really reconsider what kinship can mean beyond, just who I'm related to.
Yeah, sure.
So I have learned a lot from Laura Harjo in that work.
Well, that's awesome. So last question about the book. So in all of your study, you had to come to some kind of conclusion at the end. So in a day far off in the distant future, Cody, when Cody Sanders closes his eyes for the final time, how do you want your body to be cared for?
Ideally, I would like a natural burial in a conservation burial ground. Conservation burial grounds are basically using burial in order to preserve a big tract of land from development.
Right,
so I'd love my body to be used in almost that activistic way.
Love that.
Wrapped in a shroud or put in a very simple biodegradable container, buried in the earth, covered over, and then, left to rejoin that woodland or prairie land or wherever I happen to be living when I die.
Well, as an indigenous person, I can tell you probably about 300, 400 years from now, you'll be a part of a lawsuit. Some developers trying to dig up your bones. Well, the book is Corpse Care Ethics for Tending the Dead, and Cody Sanders teaches at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. So check out Cody's work there at the seminary, as well as his other previous books that are just absolutely fantastic. Well, Missy has given me the permission, Cody, to ask her final question. I have never asked this question, but I'm very intrigued. Our tagline at Good Faith Media is, "There's more to tell." So in light of everything that we've talked about, your lecture, your book, Cody Sanders, what is your more to tell?
Oh, gosh. More to tell. I hope there is more to tell. Yeah, well, I mean, to me, that just speaks of the nature of that, being a part of a story that I belong to, but that is beyond me, that I'm a part of. In the more immediate near future, the more to tell is that I'm going home soon to be with my partner and my dog, Susie, who I miss very much. So I'm looking forward to that near future story.
I love that. Well, Cody, you're always welcome at Good Faith Weekly. Also, Cody has written several articles for us at goodfaithmedia.org. Check those out on the website. It's always a pleasure, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We want to thank you for joining us this week as we had a very special guest with us. Amy Butler is our dear, dear friend, and we hope you enjoyed our conversation with her, as well as my one-on-one interview with Cody Sanders. Remember, his book is titled Corpse Care Ethics for Tending the Dead, and he is absolutely brilliant. So make certain you pick up that book as soon as possible. Missy and I will be back next week, but until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.